So, as if this chapter hasn't had enough chaos with our kings trying to get more power, one of them actually having his friend killed to gain power over the church, the Crusades, so we had, 200 years worth of war. Um, More war. That's what's going to happen here. So, the Hundred Years' War is going to happen between England and France, and it's going to take place between 1337 and 1453. So, of course, we're rounding when we say that 100 Years' War, right? So we're going to go through, we're going to talk about the causes and effect again, because that's what we're focusing on in this chapter. So one of the biggest things we need to talk about is the French lands. So if you remember all the way back a few days ago, we talked about the kings, and we talked about how the king died, and then there was fights over who was supposed to take over, right? Harold was the guy who gets named as the king, but then we've got the guy in France who's like, no, I'm supposed to be, that's William the Conqueror, I'm supposed to be king because Edward told me I was supposed to be king, and I told you always get it in writing if someone promises you that. That land that William the Conqueror had in France, there's a whole lot of land there. And from generation to generation, that land actually stayed in the hands of the English. And so over time, the French would like to extend their power in France and take some of that. But obviously, the English want to hang on to that. So right here, we've got a map. You can see England is right up here. Of course, it's an island. It is separated from France by this English Channel, this body of water that goes right through here. And then we've got all of these different regions in France. So the pure yellow color in here is the area that was France. That's all French. The area that is orange, so over in here, this is area that is held by England. So that's like half of France. They literally are maintaining half of the French countryside as their own. So England controls all of this up here, and some down here, by the way. And so the French kings are not really thrilled about this, and they definitely would like to get that land back. So they are actually going to fight a war over this. As I said, the French kings wanted to extend their power. Land equals power. I know I've said that before, but particularly during this time period in history, it is so accurate. So while the French kings want to extend their power, the English rulers also want to keep their land that's in France. So they want to make sure that the French don't take that away from them. Both of them would like to control the English Channel, that body of water that goes between the two of them. The reason that they would like to do that is because they want to control the trade. So whoever controls the English Channel, they could literally like charge taxes on ships, like pay a toll when you go through on the English Channel. And they could do that for anybody who is shipping goods over the water and bringing those goods into England or France. Whoever controls that controls trade and therefore controls the money situation in the area. So these are the things that are leading to war. I told you before, most wars are fought over religion or land. The Crusades were both. The 100 Years' War is definitely going to be over land. So here's what happens. It starts out with England winning a lot of very early battles, okay? So they are fighting in France. None of this fighting is going to take place in England. It's all going to be in France. And one of the biggest reasons that the English are winning is because they have the longbow. We've mentioned this once before when we talked about knights. So the longbow is pictured up here in the top right-hand corner. And the reason it's called the longbow is because it's long. It's like as tall as this guy is. So it goes about from his shin, if he used to hold it right in front of him, it would go from his shins up to his head. And the strength of the longbow is that it goes really far because it's so long. If you are really good, you could fire 3 arrows in the same amount of time it took one French guy to reload and fire on his crossbow. So you can see he's got a step on it. It's actually got a crank. See, there's one on each side where he would actually be doing one of these to reload that. So if you can fire 3 times as many arrows with the longbow as you can with a crossbow, that's going to give you a very, very significant advantage when it comes to the battle. It's almost like having 3 times as many soldiers because you can fire 3 times as many weapons. So the English are going to take off and they're going to start to win real quick on this. The longbow is a game changer. Then the more battles that they win, it seems like the French get so demoralized that they are actually like losing more battles. So it's almost a psychological thing. So if you're into sports and you have a sports team who loses all the time, hi, I cheer for the Tigers. I get this. After a while of losing over and over and over, it's just like, oh, well, we're going to lose today, right? P.S. also the Lions. We cheer for them too. So it's really hard and you get demoralized. And that was what was happening with the French. So I'd like to tell you a story that happens that's going to like change everything. So the King of France is sitting, his name's Charles. He is sitting on his throne one day and there's a knock on the door. And this young peasant girl, she's 17, she comes in and asks to speak to the king. And now normally the king would be like, no, you're a peasant, go away. But he is so demoralized, he just is like giving up. He's like, I don't care, show her in, bring her in, whatever she has to say, it's fine. So she comes in and she has an audience with the king. And as I said, she's 17, she's a she. And she's like, hi, my name's Joan. And I just wanted to let you know your army, it's losing. The English are kicking our butts. And the king's just like, really? Tell me something I didn't already know. That's why I'm sitting here all depressed. And she's like, but it's okay. Because I had a vision from God. I am supposed to lead your army into battle, and we will be victorious. And the king looks at this 17-year-old peasant girl who has just told him she's supposed to lead the French army into battle. And you know what he says to her? Okay. He literally has nothing to lose at this point. And if she really had a vision from God, I mean, who is he to argue with that, right? So this woman is named Joan of Arc. Maybe you've heard of her before. And Joan is going to take over the French army, and she will lead them into battle. And lo and behold, the 17-year-old peasant girl who had a vision from God that she is supposed to lead this army, she changes everything. The French army has a massive turnaround. She is able to pump them up in victory. And within 1 year of this battle, they go from losing almost every battle to winning almost every battle. It was actually kind of ridiculous. First of all, to have an army be willing to take orders from a 17-year-old peasant woman is remarkable. The fact that she knew what she was doing and she was actually good at it is remarkable in and of itself. So they're going to have this turnaround. And so the English start to hear stories about Joan of Arc. And they're like, well, we've got to like stop her because ever since she showed up, now they're doing great. And now they're kicking our butts. So they come up with a plan. They're going to kidnap Joan. So the English manage to sneak into the French camp. They kidnap her and they take her away. They figure they can't just kill her, which obviously would be the ideal thing for them because then she's not leading them. But they're like, if we kill her, that's just going to rile them up. So we have to convince the French that Joan is bad. If we can convince them she's bad, then they'll be like, oh, we never should be following her. And then everything will be fine and the French army will fall apart again. It's the English plan. So they take her, they put her on trial for witchcraft. They say she was a witch. It's kind of a thing during this time period. You don't like somebody, you accuse them of witchcraft, you come up with some fake evidence. There you go. Yeah. So they put her on this fake trial after they've accused her of witchcraft. They find her guilty, of course, and they burn her at the stake. So in case you don't know what that is, it's literally where they like tie you to like a giant tree post thing and they set fire underneath you until you die. It's terrible. They burn her at the stake. And then they go back to the French and they're like, you guys, you were following a witch. What is wrong with you? And of course, the French are just like, you killed our leader. It's going to have a backward effect because instead of believing that Joan was a witch and being mad that they were following her, it's actually going to rally the French army, which is what the English were afraid of in the first place. So now Joan is a martyr. A martyr is somebody who suffers or dies for their beliefs. A lot of times it's religious. In this case, they're going to see her as a martyr because she was standing up for the French. And the French are actually going to rally around her death. They're going to continue to win. And in the end, they're going to be pretty successful. Along with this rally, they are also going to win because they developed this weapon right here. This is a cannon. And it turns out that if you're the guy with the cannon, you're going to beat a bow and arrow every time. So the cannon can obviously do substantial damage, whereas compared to an arrow, not as much. So here we are. Joan has died, but it rallies the French. They develop this brand new weapon, the longbow, and they are going to end up winning the 100 Years' War. So after this happens, because the French are the ones who won, they are going to actually see a massive improvement for their monarchs. So we already talked about the monarchs trying to gain power in England. That was one of our first note sheets for this chapter. Here the French ones are going to grow. They will maintain that land that we looked at on the map. So they're going to get most of that back from the English. That's really good for them because, let's face it, it's French land, right? So they're going to get most of that back. On the flip side, the English monarchs are going to lose power because basically Parliament, who is part of their government, they're going to look at this and be like, you had 100 years and you didn't win this war. You were foolish and you sent too many soldiers. And why were you trying to kidnap Joan of Arc? Like, that was dumb. So Parliament takes a lot of power away, including what we call the power of the purse. So this is all about the money. When we're saying the purse, it's money. This means that the Parliament has to give permission for the English monarchs to basically spend any money at all. So we talked about when John, he was the third king we talked about a few days ago, he also had to gain power or gain permission to be able to use any money. And that took most of his power away as a monarch. I think I told you guys it was kind of like being grounded. Like, Mom, can I borrow $10? It's the same idea here with the English Parliament. So because the English have lost a lot of that land, it doesn't look like they're going to gain a bunch of power. They're going to turn to trading ventures. This has a massive long-term effect because as they turn to trading, they're going to go outside of Europe. They're going to head to the Middle East. They're going to head to China. And as we get closer and closer to the 1400s, as you can see here with the overlap with the 100 Years' War, that trading is going to become massive for the English. It's going to turn into expanding land for them because as they try to go to these places and trade, they will actually start to conquer. And the British Empire is going to grow so big that they say somewhere the sun was always shining on the British Empire. They said the sun never sets on the British Empire because they had land everywhere. And it literally comes back to starting trading because they lost the 100 Years' War. So this is one of those examples where losing this war actually probably worked out in the benefit for the English even more than the French. Right away, it definitely was better for the French. They get their land back, the monarchs get powerful, but long term, the English, because of this trading, it's going to be a huge deal. Now, if we realize that we have the cannon, you realize that you have to have something that will cause an explosion to make that cannonball go flying. So we have actually seen the introduction of black powder, gunpowder, into Europe. So this creates a problem for castles and for the knights. Once guns start being used, your armor is useless. It will pierce right through your armor. So the cannons also, it takes that trebuchet that we were looking at to a brand new level, and you are definitely knocking down walls with a cannon. So castles and knights go away after this time period. People still build castles for a little bit longer to live in, but it's not the same defensive mechanism that we talked about before. The point of a castle was for protection earlier. Now it's just to have a gigantic mansion to live in. The knights are going to change not only in how they're dressing for battle, but even battles themselves, because now monarchs need more than just that group of knights to kind of defend themselves. So we're not having that exchange of vassals with vassals where they're exchanging land for military service. That doesn't work anymore. We need more than a part-time army. These kings need a full-blown military. So we see the start of a professional military in Europe. Didn't really exist before. The vassals are no longer going to be getting that land for free. So we're going to see a definite change in the economy. And because those manors won't exist, because they're not giving them to the vassals, that means you guys won't be peasants on the manor anymore. So that's exciting. You're moving up in the world. So in short, at the end of the 100 Years' War, the French are going to win. They are fueled by Joan of Arc right here. She is definitely the one that turns the tide of this war. And despite the fact that she's a very unlikely person to turn the tide, she is really the reason that it does move. The longbow is a very, very strong weapon, but it is nothing compared to this cannon. So those are some of the effects that we see from the 100 Years' War, and especially some of the long-term effects that are going to lead into chapters that we're going to talk about later.